Yanam Vishaje Bhavaroginam Gurave Sarvalokanam Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Okay. So we do some more questions. This is a question everybody asks at some point or the other, or at least has in their mind at some point or the other. So it's important to know. So this is a question. Temple rituals are from the Vedas. Why do the Vedas prescribe some rituals which appear so wasteful, like pouring milk over the deity during Abhishekam? Okay. So this question everybody asks at some point, So all this, we are doing all this offerings and milk and all. And why is it being wasted? You can put it to a better use. Give it to, what happened? Uh, okay, we have to mute that. Yeah. So we can put it to better use. So this particular argument, let us look at it from, I think it has to be looked at from many different angles. So let us just first deal with this question. The wastage, you know, what is a waste? You know, first of all, who defines what is a waste? Really, who is it that decides and defines what is wastage? Because what is a waste to somebody is not a waste to another person. There is no such thing as waste. There is nothing in nature which is wasted. There's nothing in the world that is wasted. We know all that. Nothing is a waste. Everything is useful to somebody or the other, right? So that's not the point. The point here is who will decide whether this is a waste or this is not a waste. And who should decide at what point it becomes waste? That's another thing. So if I have to do Abhishekam, and then milk is a part of the Abhishekam, let us say, then at what point is 1 cup enough? Is 1 spoon enough? Is 1 gallon enough? Is 1 bucket of milk enough? At what point and who should decide that this is a waste? Okay. Now you're going to have a million different this thing opinions about this. Okay. So that is one issue. What is waste for me need not be a waste for another person also. So many times look at the relationships between parents and children. How many times you buy things for them? Somebody spends, so which a kid needs a sneaker, somebody spends $20, somebody spends $400 on a sneaker. Now who's to decide whether it is a waste or not? you know so why are you spending $400? So you can give it to so many children who don't have sneakers. So now who should ask this question? Should it be somebody else asking me who's spending the money, or should it be me asking myself? That is the first question. Okay. So when somebody offers something to Bhagavan, then should it be that person? It is that person's decision, right? The person's decision. It is based on their relationship with the Lord, with Bhagavan. The devotees offering to Bhagavan. You know, really speaking, it's between the two of them. Another person cannot question it. Another person. I offer gold. The people do that. They go offer gold offerings to the deity to put on. Okay. And then, so another person says, well, why are you offering gold? So why are you wasting money? So why don't you so he'll say, well, it is I'm giving. I'm giving. Whether I give because I have extra gold, whether I give because I don't wear it, but I give what I would have worn, who are you to say which is a waste, which is a better use, and which is not a better use? So here also, that is one aspect to this, that whatever puja is a expression of devotion, it is between the devotee and the Lord. So a third person really is not in a position to judge how much and what and how and all those kinds of things. So we that is very clear to us. So that is one aspect to this. Yes, other aspect to this. The other question is, okay, and really speaking, when you think about this, uh, the Vedas don't tell you how much milk and all to put. Okay, first of all, it's not there in the Vedas. The Vedas teach, they talk about rituals, they talk about karma, and so on. Okay, they will also describe details. Then there are other things like Dharma Shastram, where or what they call as agamas, especially connected to temples. Here the question is specific. They're talking of temple rituals, because in personally when we do pray pujas and all, you do each one, you decide, each one decides what they are going to do, how they are going to offer. There is no fixed thing like that, how much you're going to give. You just do whatever puja, whatever is available, yatha shakti, as much as you are capable of doing or what you want to do. Here it is temple. Now another important thing to keep in mind is temple is not one person's place. Okay. Temple is a place for us. It's not a place where you get together to do worship together. Okay. That concept we don't have. you know some other religions have it like that. It's a temple or a place of a house of worship, whatever you call it, is a place where there's a congregation, people gather, the community gathers, and they offer worship together. Okay. So as a community, in what about us? Temples are not looked upon like that, because our temples are not really community based. We go to all, some of there in the congregation concept, the people are connected to a particular house of worship. That is all, they will go there, all the time. So for us, it is not like that, really speaking. A temple is what is called as Devalayam. It is a place where Bhagavan is residing. Okay. The Murti Prana Pratishtha is done. That means for us, the Lord is there. Bhagavan is there. Okay. And then we go to visit. We go to visit. So it's all people. So people from all over come, and we go to all kinds of temples. We don't have allegiance to a particular temple. Okay. We go to any temple we want to go to. So it is a place where Bhagavan is. So when we go, and it's a community thing. Now, when temples are built, the idea is that, so for the sake of the whole community or the town or the whatever it may be. So in olden days, Rajas used to build temples. So that was the whole kingdom. I mean, there was a temple. So it was for the people to be able to worship together. There are a lot of reasons why people we have temples. So one is so together worship. Another thing is, not everybody can perform the same way prayers, etc. So they get a chance to go to the place where they themselves may not be able to afford certain kinds of worships. So they go there and become part of a collective worship. Okay. So but each one is visiting God. Each devotee thinks they are going to visit Bhagavan. Okay. They are going to have darshan of their Lord in the temple. Okay. So they go there for darshan. So then what they offer, so they bring whatever they want to offer. And when the temple from its own whatever the devotee offers has to be offered to the deity. Okay. Suppose there's Abhishekam going on, and then the temple decides, okay, so we with the temple means whoever is running the temple. So they are going to, when they build the temple, they decide what are the kinds of things that are required based on certain traditions which are called agamas. Okay. Not Veda doesn't tell all this detail. So in the according to agama, so we are going to, so much is going to be offered is there. It has to do also with the deity, how big the deity is. Suppose you have a murti vigraham, which is, which is 2 inches tall. Okay. Then, look, it's all an idea of proportion. This is subjective. So for a 2 inch tall vigraham, you don't want to put so much flowers that you can't see it, right? You can't see it. So obviously, accordingly, you will put. But suppose your murti is 12 feet tall, 12 feet tall, then you're not going to put just 3, 4 flowers. Okay. Because, it's big. People have to see it. There are 100 people, there are 500 people there. So, temple is for people, many people. And then many people come and bring offerings. Every time anyone takes an offering, they have to be offered. You know, you cannot say, we put only 1 gallon of milk Abhishekam, and suppose 50 people bring 50 gallons of milk, then whose 1 gallon are you going to take? Whose one going to take? You can't decide. And you can't say, okay, well, one we will put, 49 we will give to hungry people. Okay, fine. So you decide that. Then, if you are the one who's taking the milk, 1 gallon, which would you prefer? Which would you prefer? Well, you took it for Bhagavan. Okay, in your heart, you want that my milk is the one that should be put there. All the other 49 can be given to other people. Okay. So these are all the kinds of, these are all people issues. These all have to do with our mind, our thinking, our understanding, how we view it. Okay. This is not what the Veda tells you to do, any of this. This is not Veda. Veda doesn't get involved in all this. This is our human. This is the human reactions, the human feelings. In reality, what we offer to the Lord, Bhagavan doesn't really care from Bhagavan's standpoint, right? You will see in Gita, Bhagavan says this, He says, Patram pushpam phalam toyam, yome bhaktya prayachati. Whatever it is, may offer me a leaf, may offer me a flower, you know. So you offer me water. These are all things which we don't even manufacture. These are all provided, you know. The Lord Shiva, the he loves most the offering bilva. Bilva is a leaf. What are you going to do? So this is a leaf available in nature. And people just pluck few leaves, a big tree, bilva tree. The tree has countless leaves. You pluck that is the offering. So Narayana wants tulasi as an offering. Flowers are all there around. People would just pluck and offer. It is not that one has to offer gold and diamonds and silver and all from everybody. But then, if a devotee in their devotion offers, that is their offering. That we offer to Bhagavan what is valuable to us, not what is a wastage for us. Remember that. Yeah. If for the one who offers, it is not a waste, you know, just think of it as we offer to our people who we love, people who we care about, how many things we give them that others will consider a waste. Okay. But we don't consider it as a waste. So there's it's important, it's my relationship and all kinds of things. So even when a devotee makes an offering, really speaking, it comes from their heart, you know, and it is their offering, And in their mind, they do not see it as a waste. Not a waste. If they don't see it as a waste, it's not a waste. Nobody else can say it is a wastage. In fact, in rituals and all, in you got to also think of the context and the environment. In the earlier days, it's all rural people lived in rural areas. Okay, so they had to get milk was is not so difficult to get. So people had cows, and all those who could afford it, they had these things. And so it was all in house. It was all in house. Flowers and trees and things and milk and ghee, and these are all things which were readily available to them. You know, Brahmachari is supposed to do every day yajna, fire ritual. And in that, he is supposed to make a offering of milk. Okay. And the fire. So they say, the scripture says this. So they, according to that, you put couple of spoons of milk or couple of spoons of ajam, ghee. And then they remaining, they put twigs, they put twigs. So the ajam, the ghee has a certain symbolism, purificatory symbolism. It purifies, it's meant to purify. So if you have uh, generally twigs are put in the fire. Twigs are available all around the forest, etc. Twigs were available. They didn't have to even go buy. They go pick up the twigs that have fallen from the trees. Okay. They don't break down trees and cut wood for yajnas. You put twigs which have fallen from the tree. And so to purify that, they put some a ghee, few couple of spoons of ghee on top of that. So that's enough. They don't ask them to put a whole bucket of ghee there, and waste. So those are all. There are certain symbolisms in these things, and so in a symbolic way they do it. Okay. So this is scriptural. Then people also have their own sentiments, and they give, and so then that is all. That is all part of their expressions of devotion. So, really speaking, the few points here are, one is that it's not that the scripture expects anything more out of a person than they are capable of, and so there is no value judgment either from the standpoint of the scripture. you know. So, in the sense, Bhagavan says very clearly, he says, I am satisfied, but it is the sentiment. With devotion, whatever is given, it doesn't matter if it is a leaf, it is a flower, it is a. Bhagavan is fully satisfied. It's not that he is happier if you put more flowers and is less happy if you put less flowers. It's not like that. So it is the bhakti, it is the sentiment that counts. What people do, it is dependent on their sentiments. And so it's very difficult. It's not possible for us to make judgments like that in terms of what is enough, what is not enough. But there are certain what are called as agamas. There are traditions are there when it comes to worship, which we have been doing it in a certain way, and they are different. They are different when you do puja by yourself, when you do one to one, when you're doing it at home, and when it is done on a big scale. Their worship is done on behalf of many people in a temple. So, on behalf of the whole community, when they do Sankalpam and all, it is not just one person doing it. So, there the worship is for the benefit of humanity, for the benefit of mankind. So, but the whole thinking on a bigger scale. You know, so when they also do things like that, they do it on a bigger scale. They don't naturally. When you invite two people who are home for dinner, you do it on certain scale. When you invite 2000 people for a wedding, it's a different occasion. Okay. So you do it differently. Nobody does or is expected to do beyond what they can afford, beyond what they can afford. and what they can afford is subjective. One can always argue that, well, what is the limit? That limit is something which is, it changes, it changes. Scriptures, Shastram doesn't define a limit like that, At beyond what point, how many clothes should I have? One pair. One pair is enough. One pair is enough because all you need to do cover yourself. And at a time you wear only one set of clothes. Nobody can wear two sets of clothes. So everybody just needs one set of clothes. No, 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 it becomes dirty and I have to wash and all. Okay. So you need two sets of clothes. You wash one, you wear one. Then it will dry. Then next day you wear that. Anything beyond that is a waste. Correct? Everything beyond it. No, sometimes, it rains and it doesn't dry. And okay, three sets of clothes. Yeah. People who can afford a washing machine, they don't need only two sets. Poor people who can't afford washing machine, they have to hang the clothes outside. They can have three sets. So who is to say, who's to say? So really speaking, is things to understand. First, Shastram doesn't say that. Bhagavan always says that whatever you give, it is the devotion, it is the sentiment behind it, and that is enough. That is yatha shakti. Even when we do sankalpam, this is what we say. Yatha shakti ध्यानावाहनादि षोडश उपचारैः aham Shri Mahaganapati Pujam Karishye. I am doing this puja to Lord Vigneshwara. So, yeah, according to my capacity, so with all these 16 steps, is what we say and do. And it's complete. It's complete. So Veda doesn't ask us like that or set up an expectations like that. There is no need for it to do that. It is our own sentiments, and that also is very difficult for another person who's not involved to relate to what happens. So naturally, then people look at it who don't have similar value for it, and so naturally to them everything looks like a waste, because they don't have the same kind of value. So something to keep in mind. But everyone, we all have this question at some point or the other, So, okay, next one. Gita says that for those who have conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, the mind is the worst of foes. How can we control our mind? Is there any simple exercises that we can do daily to learn or practice how to control our mind? Okay. So, yeah, it says, Atmaiva Atmano Bandhuhu, Atmaiva Ripuratmanaha. We are our own enemies and we are our own friends. So, this we means our mind. We are obstacles to our certain kinds of thinking, certain kinds of values, and so on. And we become obstacles to our own growth. They inhibit our own growth. And certain kinds of attitudes and understanding and thinking and values and so on are facilitatory. They help, they make it easy to grow as a person. So emotional growth is like that. The more mature you are, the more mature you become. It's all, it helps all those things. So, but here one important point is conquer, the generally or very often we look upon this, we have to control our mind, you know control, or you have to conquer your mind. I have to conquer my mind, I have to control my mind. This word of conquering really has certain implications. To conquer something implies a degree of subjugation, resistance, fighting, you know, is an adversarial approach. So my mind is my adversary. You know, it is inimical to me. It is an obstructionist. It obstructs my growth. It creates problems for me. So I have to subdue it. I have to control it. I have to subjugate it. So that if I look upon it in that way, then I set up a struggle. You know, it becomes a struggle because the mind is going in this direction, I'm going in this direction, and so there is a conflict. It's my whole approach to the mind is a negative approach. Then what should it be? If it is cooperative, if my mind is easy to handle, if it doesn't fight, it goes obstruct me, then it is my friend. Then it is my friend. If it obstructs me, it's my enemy. So now I have to fight with it. Okay. Like that, this is really speaking about my mind is always going to, mind response. There is mana, there is buddhi also. Mind by definition, the way we talk about mind, so there are uncertainties, there are mistakes, there are distortions, there are doubts, there are all kinds of things are there in my psyche. I also have the capacity to decide, to judge, to discriminate. That is also there. So all these things get mixed up inside of me. Instead of looking at it as a adversary, something that I have to manage and control. I mean, something I have to control, and fight and conquer. Then I set up a struggle within me. A, a more friendlier way to look at it is mind is certain capacities it has. It works in a certain way, and I have to learn to manage it. I have to manage my mind. In fact, mind is not something other than myself. Mind is me. There is nothing outside of me that's a mind that I have to fight. If I am fighting the mind, I am fighting myself, really speaking. It's like shadow, fighting a shadow, shadow boxing. So this guy is learning boxing, he's a boxer. You ask him, you meet some friend, and oh, what have you been doing? Well, I gotten into boxing. Oh, really? So how long have you been boxing? Oh, I've been doing boxing now, sport, for the last 10 years. Oh, really? So have you had any matches? Yes. How many did you win? Oh, I won all of them. Really? You won all of them? Oh, that's great. That's great. Who are the ones you were fighting? Well, I was just fighting. I mean, I was shadow boxing, I was shadow box. You know what shadow boxing is? So shadow boxing is, when you just do it in the air. There's nobody really there. So when you're shadow boxing, you're winning everything. When there is something really there, then it's another story. So here mind also, this here is the same thing. You don't get stronger. You don't become a boxer by shadow boxing. It's yourself. It's yourself. You're not getting anything out of it. But here, the mind is also yourself. So you fight yourself. You're not supposed to fight, really speaking. This is not a fight. This is a question of managing. you know. I learned to manage, for which I have to, my strength comes from within, and my weakness also comes from within me. Okay. So it's a matter of mind management. How do I manage my mind is the other question. See, because mind, when we talk of, we're thinking in terms of, certain impulses and tendencies and desires and what I feel like doing and what I want to do, those kinds of things. When it comes to control or management, Management means I'm in charge. I'm in charge. The mind doesn't dictate. Means my own thoughts do not dictate what I do and where I go, but it is my own value systems thinking. It's a conflict between likes and dislikes and right and wrong. This is where dharma comes in. So, where is this struggle? What do I need to manage, really speaking? So, the management issue here is between two things. One is based on simply desires and feelings. The other one is based on judgment, on viveka. So, I have to learn to make proper judgments, which involves proper thinking, which involves proper values, proper understanding. So this is one thing. It's all of education, process of education. So by that's where all these religious disciplines come in, the values come in. Okay. So it's not a matter of just looking at one's mind and trying to figure out how to control it. Mind is just thoughts. These are my own thoughts. Thoughts are inert. Thoughts are not sentient. So it really, a thought is a thought. Okay. Thought doesn't have a capacity to do anything. So because it is in itself, it is inert. I am conscious of my thoughts. Now, what happens is my what kind of thoughts are these? Are they just thoughts based on simple I like certain things, I don't like certain things? Or are they thoughts that are based on more cognitive thinking, reasoning, right and wrong, those kinds of values? So what is it that drives my actions? What is it that drives me to do things in a certain way? What is it that drives me to act in a certain way, think in a certain way? Is it based on just what comes to my mind, or is it based on a process of reasoning and understanding and thinking? That is cognitive. Cognitive means there is a reasoning process and thinking involved. So one needs to be encouraged over the other. One is to be encouraged over the other. So if there is discrimination in my thinking, and those are the kinds of things that make me stronger, you know, stronger in terms of my mind. So that stronger for whose sake? For whose sake? For my own sake. So because I find if I don't have that self discipline in thinking, I can't help myself. You know, I make decisions for myself which I can't follow. This doesn't even have to do with other people. So I want to get up in the morning. We make so many decisions. We make so many resolutions. We want to do so many things. We end up doing nothing, or we end up doing a few of them. And then we ourselves, it is our decision, but then we cannot follow. We cannot follow. It's not somebody else's decision. I decide to get up in the morning. Tomorrow I'm going to get up at 5 o'clock because I have all these things to do. And then I set up the alarm. And my intention is to get up. And then when the alarm rings, then I just get angry. I get angry at the alarm, not even at myself. No, because now I change my mind. So this kind of changing, wavering mind doesn't help me. So what should I do now? So this is where two things are important. One is in terms of value systems. First, I need to understand what is it that helps me, what is it that doesn't help me. So, what is facilitatory to my growth, what is inhibitory to my growth. With all these understandings, I develop a value system in my mind. And so that if I value something, then I'm more inclined to follow it or do that. If we don't have a value for something, we are not as inclined or motivated to go that way. So, this is where values become important. So, learning to discriminate and so cultivate values which are going to help my growth. This is called Antakarana Shuddhi, Antakarana Shuddhi. Purification of the mind. Okay. Whatever, it's not that the mind is good or bad. This is not about good or bad. This is about certain ways of thinking and attitudes and conclusions which are helpful to me in terms of maturity, emotional maturity, or which are not helpful to me. You know. And so then I go through that process, and as I learn more and more about these values, right and wrong, that is what is called as the pure mind. Okay. The pure mind. So this is one thing, one exercise is to educate myself and cultivate these values. The other one has to do with just learning to manage the process of thinking. The thinking, there are two things in the mind. One is the content, one is the process. Okay. Content is what you think. What you think is the content of the mind, the kinds of thoughts, value based, the kinds of values, right and wrong. So, likes and dislikes, these are all content. What am I thinking about? Another is the process, how my mind thinks. You know, so some people's mind is, for example, very distractible. I can't focus my attention. It goes all over the place. So that's called a certain process of thinking. Is it logical or illogical? You know, some people are more logical in thinking than other people. It's all how the mind gets habituated. What are the habits in terms of thinking? So these are all certain processes of mind. So here, certain practices help, certain practices, which is why we have not only values Gita talks about, amanitvam, adambitam, ahimsa, shanti, all those are values, but it also gives certain techniques or exercises like meditation, dhyanam. It's a very, very, very useful and important exercise. So doing certain things really and practicing certain things which helps the mind to calm down. You know. So these are called as spiritual practices or disciplines. Also religious disciplines. Here all I'm using the term religion because there is also Bhagavan involved in this in terms of our mind and our understanding. So because this is a religious spiritual pursuit. So here meditation, we don't look upon meditation as just some kind of exercise like stationary bike and treadmill. You know, meditation, if there is no Bhagavan in the process, it's not called meditation according to how we define it and how we understand it. So it is, so those practice helps my mind to calm down, helps my mind to focus. And also, since God, Bhagavan is involved in this, it becomes a purificatory also. So that kind of meditation is also purificatory. If Bhagavan is not involved in this, I just simply sit and do some focusing and things like think of the beach and whatnot, then also it is some benefit will be there. But it's not the same thing. It's not purification of the mind. It is only some degree of calmness the mind will get. Now, of course, your blood pressure will go down. But for blood pressure going down, meditation is not the primary treatment modality for lowering blood pressure. You know. So in any case, so these two things, one is in terms of values, which purifies the mind. The other is in terms of the various religious disciplines. Even these vratams, vratams are things that I am going to do certain thing. They decide this. It's like a promise I make, a commitment I make to myself. So for the next, whatever, for 1 year, every Monday, I'm going to go to the temple. This is a vratam, you know. So like a resolution. But here resolutions, we all know what is resolution. New Year's resolution is only for the new year. That's why it's called New Year resolution. The 1st of January, the one day of the year. That's the day you make the resolve. Then 2nd of January is not a New Year resolution. The year is already begun. So it doesn't apply. It's not like that. Here I make a resolution for to myself and to God. I'm going to come visit you at the temple every Monday for the next year. Then you do that. Then you do that. What does this do? It makes me stronger. Okay. Decisive. Commit. I understand what's a commitment. You understand what it takes. You know. Then in between something major event is going on that day. Now I have a problem. What do I do? That is where I learn to prioritize what I value more and things like that. So this simple, whether it is a simple discipline of doing something on one particular day or doing it over a period of time, like that people make vratams. I'm going to go visit this temple. I'm going to do fasting, upavasam. Every time I do something which is difficult to do and I'm able to do it, I I become stronger that much. Right? Olympics is going on now. You know all that. They all the top people, they break records. You become stronger and stronger and stronger, and then you break the record, then you break the next record, you know. So that our lady from Assam, she got the silver for weightlifting. Okay. Now one day she'll get the gold. Then after she gets the gold, then what happens? So she's the one maximum top in the world. Now it's time. Now you relax. Like we say, oh, once I get $1 million, then I'll relax. Nobody relaxes anyway. But there, after a certain point, then they want to fight their own record. You know, they want to beat their own record. Okay. Because every time you beat your own record, you become stronger. So disciplines are like that. Discipline is not something that is enforced upon us by the scripture or the religion or by anybody else. These are certain things which we decide to do and we do it. And when we accomplish it, it makes us that much stronger. So, like that, meditation and all kinds of vratams and all that are there also help us make our mind stronger. So, now I have a mind which is purified in terms of its content, which is disciplined and strong in terms of its process. Now I can manage my mind better and it is a friend to me. It's a friendly to me because it helps my process of growth. So these are the ways in which we manage our mind so that it is a mind that is a friend. Means I am my own, I'm not fighting my shadows. Really. Most of our battles in our life are our own shadows, they say, or ghosts. You know, we don't need to worry about other ghosts. Really, we believe in them or not is a different matter. Even if we believe in them, because they have better things to do than come and harass us. They already lived their life. Now they are wherever they are. They are doing their thing. It's like they are not concerned about us. So we need not be concerned about them or afraid of them. And you can't deal with them now anyway. You deal with them later when you meet them. In the meanwhile, what am I fighting here? I'm fighting. Ghost is what happened in the past. So we have our pasts. We have our regrets and whatever. And these are what haunt us in life. And we spend a lot of our energy fighting these things. So these don't help. help us in the process. It can help sometimes if they help us grow. Those are the friendly ones, those are friendly ghosts, Casper and all that, our own past experiences and all. So they again they can become an aid for our growth process. So that is all how we go about managing our mind. Is it necessary to learn Sanskrit to truly understand Gita? Chanting the verses is so calming, and yet sometimes when chanting, I feel it may be irrelevant because the full meaning may not be understood. You know. So here I had mentioned this. If you get a chance, if you haven't heard, listen to that talk on YouTube on Guru. I've talked about scripture, the role of scripture. So Gita is our scripture. So is it necessary to learn Sanskrit? What does any language do? Let us say Bhagavad Gita original is in Sanskritam. But what is the purpose of any language? It is to communicate. Correct? It is to communicate. So here the question is, do I need to know Sanskrit in order to understand what is being communicated? Do I need to know a particular language? No. What is communicated is knowledge. Okay. Language. A particular language is just a tool, it's a means. A word is a symbol to communicate an idea. Suppose I say table. So I'm not communicating, nothing to do with the sound, knowing what this sound table. It is something that it stands for, it symbolizes. So when I use the word table, really speaking, I'm giving you the message about this object, not the sound. So any language is like that. A language is a means of communication. And scriptures use a certain language. Our scriptures are in Sanskritam. Okay. Now, in order to understand the message, if I know the language, it is perhaps easier to understand the message. Even knowing a language is not enough always. Keep in mind to understand the message. Everybody, you all knows English. And then you buy a book on some subject, obscure subject, say electronics or whatever, high level book, PhD book, or a book on higher mathematics. Now you know English, you know what is XYZ and all that stuff. But just because you know the language doesn't mean that if you read that book, you're going to understand. Because the words and the terminology and the usage and the syntax and the concepts and all are all different. You don't know. So language is not enough to understand, to gain the knowledge, to gain the message. Even language is not enough. Neither is language necessary because the same can be communicated in another language also. So when it comes to understanding the message of Gita or the message of scripture, one doesn't have to know Sanskritam as a language. Okay. But then if the message is only in Sanskritam, then of course I have to know. No, how about other languages? Suppose it's translations and things. If somebody can communicate the same message in another language, then the message, I still gain the knowledge. I still gain the knowledge. Yeah. Now, but it all that is where the communicator becomes important. So the one who communicates Is communicator is important in either case, whether it is Sanskritam or some other language. Because the one who helps me understand whether I am understanding in Sanskrit or whether I'm understanding in some other language, both the issue is the same. I have to have somebody who helps me understand through the language of communication that was there. So it is not essential to understand the meaning or what the message is of the scriptures naturally. Now, let's take this example of, for example, chanting, prayer. So now I am now chanting some prayer. I don't know Sanskritam at all. And I'm chanting some verses, you know, chanting some verses. And they calm me down. They calm me down. Now, there are two ways, two reasons why it could calm me down. One could be it's just the sound. It's like listening to instrumental music. You don't know anything about music. You don't know anything about ragams and melodies and all kinds of stuff. But it's nice to listen and it calms the mind. It could be like that. But it's not just like that here now. You say, I'm chanting. I'm chanting. Is it without meaning? Totally ignorant of what it is, like instrumental music. No, no. I know it is a prayer. I know it's a prayer. But I don't know what it means. Now, already you know what it means. Okay. That it is a prayer. That it is a prayer. So that means in my mind, it's not instrumental music. It is a prayer. So Bhagavan is involved. So already I have given it a meaning. I may not fully understand the meaning, what it says, but I know it is a prayer. Then suppose few words here and there I know. Then now I know a little bit more. It becomes more meaningful. And if I understand the whole thing, then of course it is more meaningful. So definitely it is not irrelevant. Not irrelevant. It depends on how much, what it means to me, what it means to me. Even if it just means that it's a prayer that I'm doing, even though I don't understand it, that itself is, it gives me a certain attitude towards it. I'm prayerful. I may not know what the prayer is, but I'm prayerful. Sometimes you sit in front of the altar and just quietly you sit. You're not thinking anything particular. You're not reciting anything. You're not doing anything. You're just sitting there. And then you feel calm. And the why is that? Because in your mind, and my mind, I am prayerful, even though I'm not reciting a prayer. You know? So we all know all those things. So it has to do with certain other things also that go with chanting. It's not only about the language and the meaning, but definitely the more one knows, the more one understands, the more meaningful it becomes. Even though one may not know the language. That's why so many prayers we recite, and you know little bit about it. But the attitude is still, there's a lot of attitude of devotion that gets evoked in reciting those things. So anyway, so we'll stop at that. Uh, there is one more question is there. We'll see that next time. Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om